Hi, friends. We were recently walking around New Braunfels, Texas, and began to consider that there might be some Tartarian architecture connection. This video is just for entertainment purposes, sharing our musings. We've not done any research on any of these buildings, just speculating. This old tree in Landa Park is one of the biggest I've seen in central Texas, and I just had to share it. New Braunfels is a small town between Austin and San Antonio, currently about 100,000 residents. So here we are in front of St. Peter and Paul Catholic Church in New Braunfels, Texas, one of the older churches in the area. And one of the first things we noticed was not just the steeple, but this geometric shape in the center between the steeple and the door. We noticed that that geometric shape in the center appears in Tartarian architecture and is meant to be an energy focuser for sound. And we all know old churches had beautiful organs. The clock appears to be more modern, and it was supposedly added in 1889. The steeple and this architectural element appear to be older, and we just kind of wonder if they were taken from another builder and incorporated into this one. When we went to the Sophienberg History Museum, this church was not listed as one of the original churches, even though the plaque states it was built in 1871 and the steeple added in 1881. Here's an old postcard of St. Peter and Paul. And even in this postcard, you can look at how old and weathered the building appears to be. Here we are at the first Protestant church property with multiple buildings that take up a whole block. The church was founded in 1845. This particular building is said to be the Sunday School Auditorium, dated 1929, and caught our attention. The placement of the windows close to the ground and the pattern of the bricks seems to suggest that the building and window pattern goes down into the ground. The disproportionately large windows on the side make a little bit more sense when you see that there are stairs going down to a basement. Basements in Texas are really unusual. The ground is really hard limestone around here, and it's amazing to believe that without modern power tools and big machinery that the church would have chosen to blast out the ground to make a basement. Windows down at the bottom there. We're still on the church property, right in front of the church here, and you can see the 1910 Walter Faust house, also called the Heritage House. We notice the beautiful curved metal architecture element on the top. And the entrance to the first floor requires walking up a couple of stairs. And the openings at the bottom under the house mirror the placement of the windows above and made us wonder if this house too had a basement going down, and that maybe those openings at the bottom were former windows. And here's an old postcard we saw in the Museum of the Faust House, called here a private residence in New Braunfels. Look at this beautiful home that was built by these immigrants who came with horse and buggy just a few decades prior. Okay, so we're leaving the Protestant church and we're going down a block, and we can see additional red brick, older style architecture with a curved metal roof feature and what looks like maybe an antenna on top. At this point, we chatted about how downtown New Braunfels looks similar to the other small Texas towns. The same architecture, the same downtown layout. Quite interesting. And right next door again, we're all in the same block, is this building that is the Faust Hotel under remodel. Notice it's the same brick as the church. Look at the architectural detail. Look at the ornate detail that's carved above each of the windows and at the top. Just remarkable, beautiful detail. Before the age of computer-aided design. We don't make buildings like this anymore. And in the front, there appears to be what might be a water feature, a former water feature. We know in Tartarian architecture, it's believed that water was part of the energy power distribution system through rivers, underwater tunnels, and such. And we noted how close New Braunfels is to rivers and waterways. Okay, so here we are in the basement of an antique store in New Braunfels. We're in the basement, and you can see what appears to be 3 windows on this side of the wall. These openings have been bricked in with different brick than is on the rest of the wall. And there's a grate going up to the street. We'll go outside and look at that next. So why would you build alcoves and windows in a basement in Texas? It's really interesting the way that's done. And how far down does this really go? Okay, so here we are outside the antique store where we just were in the basement. And looking at the front of the building, you can see it's been stuccoed over. And on the right, you can see where some of it's been broken away, and you can see the original brick behind it. And that the brick matches the building that's right next door that claims to have been built in 1913 when the population of New Braunfels was around 3,000 people. Does that really make a whole lot of sense? I don't know. Let's look a little bit closer at this 1913 building. It's beautiful little tin roof there. It's now a bakery, which is kind of cool. Now, right across the street, it appears that there is another building that has been stuccoed or rebricked over, but behind you can see that original brick. So here we are outside the outlet mall. These 3 grates are where those 3 windows were below the surface in the basement. As you can see, they're the same shape as the windows above. Obviously, this wall's been stuccoed over and those other windows were maybe removed. The facade has changed, but this was probably an original building to this area. So here on this same building, as we are walking down the sidewalk, you can see the brick behind the stucco. Then we walk down to the end of the building at the end of the mural. And once again, you can see windows going underground. Okay, and if you look, we're kind of going a little bit downhill here, and the window matches up. The line matches up. If you draw the straight line between these two and where those grates are, you can see it's sloping down. So naturally, those windows would have been underground as the sidewalk is sloping downwards. So here we are in front of the First National Bank building with beautiful red brick, reported to be between 1872 and 1894, when again the population of New Braunfels was less than about 2,000 people. To have built all of these churches, all of these buildings, the whole downtown of this quality. It's really unbelievable. This red brick really stands out. So underneath here, there are some openings with some grates inside that make us wonder if this building also goes down into a basement level with bricked-in windows. Another clue that's interesting, you can see this entrance is up a few steps. It's not at the ground floor level. And this beautiful, huge, tall door here. Quite lovely building. So here we are in another antique store here in downtown New Braunfels. And this kind of is interesting, and they're showing you what's behind the wall. You can kind of see the newer style brick and the older style brick. It makes us wonder if this little section with the newer brick used to be a window opening that was bricked in, which might give you a clue. Looking over here to the right, seeing this arch that's been bricked in, you can kind of see the 2 different bricks there too. Just kind of cool. Here's another static picture of it in the same place. I just had to slip this in. Hope it makes you laugh. So this is a good example of a modern storefront of an older building. If you take a look just to the right of this building, on the side of it, you can see the original windows, the red brick, And in the front, you see a new faux finish that looks like it's made out of stucco or plaster. And you'll see this all over town, remodeled exteriors, much less detail and artistry in the architectural elements at the top of that building. They tried. And then next door to it, we have this one that's been painted. Wondering if there are some original bricks underneath that with red as well. All in the same block. So here at the Sophienberg Museum and Archives, we learned that New Braunfels was settled in 1845 by German immigrants looking to better their futures. The $120 per person or $240 per family price probably was expensive at that time. It seems they were promised 320 to 640 acres of land and some farm supplies to help them carve out a new beginning, which must have taken a lot of backbreaking labor and time. The man that brought them here was a German prince and military officer named Prince Karl of Solms-Braunfels. He was in the Austrian army. 1 week before the settlers arrived, he purchased 1,300 acres on the Guadalupe River and named the settlement New Braunfels in honor of his home in Germany. New Braunfels is very near some waterways. And this little bubble model is Prince Karl's boyhood home in Germany. This castle befitting a royal bloodline prince, this family in Germany. And here's Prince Karl. This cabinet was interesting. It supposedly housed the important papers of the early settlers. Underneath this architectural element is a keyed lock for the trunk, which is kind of cool. And looking at a display of cabinet makers, a tool chest of what would have been available to a craftsman back in the 1800s to build all of these buildings. Quite simple hand tools, nails, little hammers, clamps, bunch of hand tools, no power tools. There's what they used to build. And above it is a packing list that Prince Karl recommended settlers have with them on their wagons. Pretty simple list. And right next to this display was a little wall showing the brick way that they crossed the beams and made the walls in the early German construction. And that brick is what we're calling the newer brick. So this is the early churches section of the museum, and that St. Peter's and Paul and the first Protestant church that we looked at yesterday don't appear to be in any of these pictures. All of these churches look like wooden structures to me for the most part, very small and simple. Here's some pictures of old buildings around town. Notice how massive and detailed they are. Just monumental buildings. Post office, here we go. Here's the new post office in New Braunfels. Notice the windows that go underground and the beautiful red brick right next to that other beautiful little structure. These are postcards we're looking at, supposedly old postcards hanging up on the wall here in the museum. There's another one. And another looking at San Antonio Street with the horse and buggies. It all looks very similar to what it looks like here in 2025 walking down the street. The building hasn't changed too much, the landscape. So these immigrants, they came and they built this city, and they also built a cotton gin. This one actually says built, it doesn't say established. So they built a cotton gin, clothing being one of the more fundamental necessary needs of life, food, shelter, clothing. And this is the engineering and architecture that went into building something as important as a cotton gin. And this mill. Interesting. So here are the founders of New Braunfels, and I would imagine if you were able to look into the biographies of these men, you'll likely find that they were at least part of powerful, rich families, and more likely also part of secret societies like the Masons. Powerful men. So we're outside the museum, and there's this placard commemorating Herman Seal, one of the founders, crediting him with starting the schools to teach the children the history they needed to know, among other things. And he was also the one that established the first Protestant church, again, the one we visited earlier with the complex taking up the whole block. He was also a politician, it appears. So 3 months after the settlers' arrival in 1845, they established the first school under a tree to begin to teach the students. And in 1858, they chartered the New Braunfels Academy. Right next to this little write-up, there's a photo that's supposedly taken in 1893 of the school and the kids. Those kids don't look too thrilled to be in that gorgeous brick school building. Does this building look less than 40 years old? I wish my elementary school was that fancy, the two-tone bricks and such. It's a nice school. Big door. So we were recommended to come and eat at the Alpine House restaurant here in New Braunfels for lunch. It turns out it is also a historic building from the 1850s, one of the original settlers' homes. Beautiful construction, modest, simple. And I'll tell you, I've lived in Central Texas over 25 years, and I've tried many, many of the famous German restaurants around here. And this is the first and only one that wowed me. I mean, everything, the food, the service was perfection. I will dream about this mushroom soup like forever. So good. This brick wall in the Alpine restaurant was the confirmation of our theory of new brick versus old brick. This simple home was built by a settler in 1850 and shows what we've been calling the newer brick, kind of this rough, less perfectly symmetrical and lighter color than the other brick with the sharper, clean edges. This newer brick is exactly what we saw in those spaces in the antique store, the basement where we believe where the windows were bricked in with that newer brick. And it's also the brick we saw over town, this older brick, and the many buildings that we saw around town. So we figured this was a cool little clue that validated some of what we were feeling about the construction and the bricks, the older ones being a lot more symmetrical, and the newer brick being more rough and handmade looking. There we are back in that basement, and there's the museum again showing you that newer brick that matches what's in the Alpine restaurant. So this is a small town. This is from the Texas Almanac, this census. The current population is about 100,000, but between 1850 and 1900, it was average approximate 2,000 people. So how could a population of poor immigrants with horse and buggies and the carpenter's tool chest like the one we saw in the museum build these large buildings downtown with such precision and artistry, in contrast to their humble and simple homes and the other buildings like their cotton mill? Where did these building supplies come from? How did these poor immigrants pay for them? And why would they have financially prioritized these fancy buildings over the function of them as they tried to establish their new town? And how many people of this 2,000 census population were builders actually working on constructing on these massive buildings? What manpower and time would it have taken us in 2025 to build these with modern power tools, computer-aided design, and all the things we have at our disposal now? And can we really duplicate this? It really is extraordinary to wonder how these small-town immigrants created this and duplicated the style similar to the architecture in every other small town across Texas and America, where Germans weren't the primary ethnic group. Fascinating. We hope this makes you look at history and the buildings in your town and those you visit a little bit differently. Thanks for watching.